Hey everyone, I'm Coral. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here today with the books that I finished in May. This month I decided to do something a little bit different than my normal TBR. Nothing like super crazy or anything like that, but I just wanted, actually this came from rearranging and then unrearranging my books to, I had them sorted by color. I thought it would be cool to choose one book from each color of the rainbow, plus also pink, and then a book that had a rainbow on its spine too. So that's not the only thing that I read this month, but those were like the books that I set for my TBR, and I managed to read all of them, surprisingly, because this month has really sucked, especially towards the end of the month. I don't live in Minnesota anymore, but I lived there for most of my life. I've only lived in California for about 8 years, so it's really hard seeing the place that I feel like is my home in total chaos. My best friend, who is pregnant with her first baby, lives in the Twin Cities, as along with my sister and my uncle, who is like a second father to me. He doesn't have any of his own kids, so it's like me and my sisters are his kids almost. So it's really hard, especially these last couple days. So I think I'd like to start with this book that I read, the last book that I finished this month, which was Darling Rose Gold. And I'm so surprised that I got through this as quick as I did, because it is really hard for me to focus on really anything when I'm not feeling like super good. Even TV shows and shit like that, it's really hard for me to focus on them. I just like can't. I don't feel good. My brain like doesn't want to think about anything besides what's bothering me, you know? So I started Darling Rose Gold, and I basically read it until I was done. I read it in like 2 days, but it was like I started one evening and then I finished it the next morning. And this is a thriller. It is about a young woman named Rose Gold who, when she's about 18 years old, finds out that her mother has been making her ill her whole life. She grew up thinking that she had a chromosomal defect. She was wheelchair bound. Her teeth are rotted from throwing up for years and years and years, because everything she ate seemed to bother her stomach. She had a feeding tube. She used to shave her hair, or her mom made her shave her hair basically, because the logic was, well, it's gonna come out anyways, because she was so malnourished that you know what your body kind of does when you aren't getting nutrients. Like, it has to put those things, that energy, towards the most important parts of your body. So stuff like your hair isn't important any longer. So she finds out that her mother's been making her sick this whole time. Her mother gets sent to prison. She testifies against her. And in the present time in this book, Rose Gold's mom, Patty, is just getting out of prison, and Rose Gold invites her to live with her. Now, her mom's only been in prison for about 4 years, so it's not a very long amount of time. And her mother still really says that she's innocent and she was just doing her best to take care of Rose Gold. You don't really know going into this like what Rose Gold's intentions are and what Patty's intentions are, because you know that something about this arrangement isn't quite right, but you don't really know exactly what is. I ended up giving this 4 stars. It was so engaging and just really compelling to read. I guess my problems with it are this story about her childhood is super duper similar to Gypsy Rose Blanchard's story. If you know about that recently, it's it happened quite a few years ago, but it's blown up recently, probably like last year or the year before maybe, when HBO did a documentary called, I think it was called Mommy Dead and Dearest or something like that. But so the past, I mean, reading about Rose Gold's past was very similar to Gypsy Rose's. I mean, their names are very similar. Their mothers seem very similar. So like, I don't know, something about that seemed kind of like a cop-out almost. It's like this character didn't belong to this author almost. Things did obviously differ a little bit because in the Gypsy Rose case, she murdered her mother, and she is in prison currently. But in this case, obviously, Rose Gold is the one out of prison and Patty is the one in prison. So that kind of bothered me just because it was like, oh, okay, well, I know all this information already, basically. But then reading the parts where Patty and Rose Gold are now living together, there was some stuff in there about Patty, the mother's past. There was a lot of blame on what she put Rose Gold through. She was like blaming her past for that, but they didn't really explain what was going on in her past. It was just like, oh, she was abused by her father, like her father would beat her with a belt. It's like, I don't know, something about that. It just, the author made it seem like it was this like really super sinister thing. Not that being physically abused by your parents isn't like a really sinister thing, but it was played up to be, at least in my mind, like it would be so much more, and it was that. So I don't know about this. I ended up giving it 4 stars because of the twist, and kind of, it really made it hard to like all the characters in this book. Basically, I didn't like anybody in this book, which I liked. This book gives you a lot to think about, I think, and it was fun to read. Like I said, I think the biggest thing that surprised me about this book was just that it was so compelling that it helped me keep my mind off of a lot of the current events happening right now. So on to the next one. I also read, this is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. This is a book that I had on my list for my If You Got It, Read It challenge. There are 4 other books on there, but I can't remember which I did. I think this one. So this is one of them anyways. Like I said, this is a reread for me. This is a Stephen King book. It's about a girl named Trisha. She is 12 years old. She is 9 years old. Holy cow. I think I do that all the time in this book, and this is, I don't know, I've read this book quite a few times. It's just really, with a lot of Stephen King's characters, I think, his children characters, they just seem much older than they are. So she's 9. Thinking about it, that is wild. I have nieces who are 9 years old right now, and like the thought of them being in the wilderness and surviving is just like so not, it just does not seem like that would go well. But Trisha, she's lost in the woods. Luckily, her mother has given her a little bit of kind of like wilderness, teaching her about the areas surrounding her house in Maine and stuff like that. So she knows a little bit of kind of survival, weird survival information. I don't know. This is one of my favorite King books. It's one I reread. Well, I used to reread it a lot. The last couple of years I haven't done that, so this is the first time in probably like 6 years I've read this over. Still really love it. It brings back a lot of nostalgia. It's really a short, quick read. It has a really spooky scene in it, and it makes you really not want to be in the woods. Oh, and this is a five-star book. I think the only one I had this month. I forgot to do my stats at the beginning of the video, but now I just don't want to do them because I've already started talking, so I don't know. I don't know if anyone actually cares about that stuff anyways. It's mostly for me, so I don't know. Alright, next up is Slade House by David Mitchell. This was kind of a more paranormal book. I ended up giving this 4 stars, and this is a very strange book about this house called Slade House, and man, I don't know how much information to give you here because there are so many strange layers to this story. But basically, Slade House, not everyone can see Slade House. And the people who do see Slade House and go into Slade House never seem to come out again. I think that's all I'm going to tell you about it. I liked this much more than I expected to. Not that I expected not to like it, but I thought it would just be like, okay, because I really don't hear anybody ever talk about this. But like I said, 4 stars. It was very strange, and it had really great characters. Even though we skipped through a lot of POVs, this was still really good. Okay, I also ended up reading The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling. This is kind of a sci-fi horror book, really heavy on like the survival elements. The main character here, her name is Jair, and she is kind of like the lone person on an exploration team. She basically, I don't know, she basically is like setting out caches and like trying to help map this cave system and stuff. But she's in this suit that she cannot take off the entire time she's in this, or basically on this planet. I don't know if I don't know if it's a planet or moon. I have no idea, honestly. I just know that she's in this cave. But, and this suit is controlled by somebody remotely, so somebody who is way far away on probably even a different planet is controlling her suit. So that person controls whether she can move or not. It controls any medicine or drugs that are put into her bloodstream. So it's a little bit spooky, not having control of that kind of stuff yourself. So, I mean, that's really the basics of it. Jair isn't sure if she can trust the woman, her name is M, who is controlling her suit. She thinks that M might have ulterior motives to why she's having Jair explore this cave system. So I was really hopeful when I went into this book. It felt like it lacked so much of the world building, and because I mean, clearly something happened and people are kind of like planet hopping. There are some planets that they call green planets where apparently like plant life grows where they don't on other planets. It's really confusing. You don't get a good grasp of what these suits really look like. You don't get a good grasp of how this cave looks. There are these things called tunnelers in these caves. I don't know what the fuck that is. Like, so much of it was left unexplained. This also felt very long. There was so much of this, like, her going to this camp, and then to that camp, and then to that camp, and then back to this camp, and then to that camp, and then to this camp, and then that camp. You know what I mean? It was very confusing. It had a little map at the beginning of the paperback. Anybody reading an ebook or an audiobook wouldn't have the access to this. So it was very confusing in that aspect. However, I really liked, I liked the way that this ended a lot. And I liked the idea of it. And I really think that this had the potential to be such a great book if only it had been explained a little more, which is wild considering that this is like a 400 and almost 450 page book. Oh, just kidding. It's only 400 pages. But like, you have room in there to explain these things. They aren't explained, and that was really kind of a bummer. So I ended up giving this 3 stars. I wouldn't say that I don't recommend it, but I would say maybe don't get your hopes up too high. I really would like to read more of Caitlin Starling's stuff because it seems like it has the potential to really be something that I would really like. This one just, I don't know, didn't quite hit the spot for me. On to the next book. This is Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This was a book that I started like 3 years ago. And I read 80 pages, like 82 pages, and I put it down and I was like, I don't know about this right now. And it sat on my shelf and sat and sat and sat and sat, and I decided to pick it up this month. And I'm so glad that this is a book that I wasn't liking and could have at that point probably DNF'd and like been okay with, you know? But I'm really glad that I didn't, and I let it sit until I was ready to pick it up, even if it took like 2.5 years. Because I ended up really liking this, and I'm very excited to read more in this series. I ended up giving this 4 stars. This is like a utopian kind of world, and I think the book itself probably would be considered dystopian because of some of the problems that arise in the story. But when you start out, it's very much a utopian world because they've basically found a way to cheat death and cheat illness. You know, people don't die from old age, they don't die from accidents, they don't die from illnesses any longer. They've had to create these things called scythes to help glean people, to kind of keep up with the population, to make sure that the earth doesn't become overpopulated. So it's kind of cool the way they do it, because some scythes, I mean, really, once you're a scythe, you can kind of decide to do things how you want to within certain parameters. But some scythes choose to look back on like statistics that we had in what they call the age of mortality, which is like the age we'd be living in now, where people still died of things. So it'd be like 6,000 people a year died of drowning. So, you know, 0.6% of all the people I have to kill should be drowned, and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting to see the mechanics of all that, to see what the different methods, different scythes choose to glean people. So, but I guess the story is about this scythe named Scythe Faraday. He is one of the, not the original scythe, but he is one of the longest members of the scythedom, one of the oldest members of the scythedom, I guess, and he is going to take on an apprentice, but he chooses instead to take on 2 apprentices, which is not something that's ever happened before. And I mean, that's basically it. The book goes on from there. We're following these apprentices train. There are some really political things that happen. I guess the one thing for me that knocked it down to 4 stars is that there was this event that happened in the book. It seemed like it was going to be a really big deal. It seemed like it was going to change the entire trajectory of the story. And then it was like it followed through with that a little bit, but then all of a sudden it was like someone just sprinkled fairy dust on the problem and it went away, and then everything was back to normal, and I was like, what? So I don't know, that really bothered me. I hate when problems in books are solved just by like somebody being like, it's okay, and then everyone's like, oh yeah, it's okay, and then the problem's just gone. I hate that. I mean, there has to be high stakes when it comes to stuff like this. I feel like there wasn't in this one. So 4 stars, still so good. This is a YA book, and I think my time with YA might be dwindling down. Like I feel like my tolerance for like young feeling YA is very low, but this definitely was not that. This is a really great young adult book, and I can't wait to get to the next book. Okay, next I want to talk about a audiobook that I DNF'd this month, and that is The Chill by Scott Carson. Is that? Yeah, by Scott Carson. I believe that's a pen name for Michael Corrida, if that's how you say his name. I know I have one of his books and that he writes thrillers mostly, but that's it. So The Chill. I don't really know where this is supposed to fit in, and I don't really know what the plotline is supposed to be. I guess it's kind of like a paranormal book, but it basically revolves around this dam. I can't remember what the name of the dam is, but they call it The Chill for short. And it follows a couple different characters, and they all seem to be tied together by this town that is basically in the dam now. Like they flooded the town for the dam. Town used to be where the dam is now, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. And they didn't kill anybody, but the town had to evacuate, and like there are some vengeful spirits who are mad about that like 200 years later or something. I DNF'd it. I listened to 85% of this book, and it is a big book. It was, I don't know, probably like 600 pages, I think it ended up being, because when I calculated it, it was like I listened to like 450 pages basically. So I don't know, very long book. I don't get the point of it. I didn't care about any of the characters. I didn't understand this weird, like, paranormal revenge plot almost it was. And some of that could be like, well, you didn't read the whole book, stupid. It's like, yes, I get it. Like, maybe I would have understood, but I just like didn't care at that point. Like, I don't care about your weird beef from 200 years ago. Like, I get it, your town was flooded and stuff, that really sucks, but it's not like they flooded it with you in it. That's all I have to say about the show. Let me know if you liked it or what you thought about it. I ended up giving it 1 point, or 1 star. 1 point. Oh my god, my brain. Okay, on to the next book. Anyways, then I read He Started It by Samantha Downing. I read her first book, His Lovely Wife, last month. So I was very excited. I won a copy of this from Goodreads, so I wanted to get into it right away. It came out at the very end of last month, so it's been out for about a month now, and this is a thriller. I don't want to give you too much information about this, but basically this is about 3 estranged siblings who have to come together when their grandfather dies, and when they're read his will, there is this stipulation that they will get his like vast fortune basically if they recreate this road trip that they took with him when they were kids. And so it was not a road trip that happened for good reasons. So I mean, if that gives you any kind of indication of how the story goes, I mean, no one's happy about having to do this again, but they're hoping that they'll get some money out of it. And they're all kind of terrible people, raised by terrible people who were raised by terrible people. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. For comparison, I ended up giving His Lovely Wife 5 stars. So I guess about this I have to say, I really like her writing. It is so compelling and easy to want to read. I wanted to know what was going to happen, but this felt so dang long. My Lovely Wife is just about the same length. I think this is almost but not quite 400 pages, and it felt very long. And I think because they were on a road trip, that made it feel even longer, because it was like, I mean, it was very formulaic. Like, here's this site that we saw on that trip, and then here's the hotel that we stayed at, and then here's this next place we went to, and then here's the hotel the next night, and then we ate breakfast here, and then we went, you know, it very much follows a pattern that got kind of exhausting. I didn't understand the end of this. When you get to kind of like the whodunit of the story, didn't really understand that. It felt kind of cheap and just, I don't know, just didn't care about it, I guess. I also listened to this audiobook called Very, what was it? Sorry. Very Dreadful. I was gonna add like 5 more varies to that, but that's not what it's called. This is by someone named Albert Marin, and it is a non-fiction book about the influenza during during and after World War II, but like it was going on a lot in World War II. What am I trying to say? I don't know. And this book was very boring. I thought like there was information in it, but it kind of just seemed like someone was reading me a textbook. Like there wasn't a very clear narrative, which like it's nonfiction, I get, but like there are lots of nonfiction books that I've read and really enjoyed. And not that this one was bad, it was just very boring. So I ended up giving it 2 stars. Next, I want to talk to you about Made for Love by Alyssa Nutting. This was one of my 5-star predictions, and it wasn't quite 5 stars. It was like 4.5 stars, and I will tell you why. This book is about a woman. What's her name? I can't remember already. Hazel, that's right. Hazel. She is married to a tech mogul, and he is very, like, fucking weird. He's crazy. He wants to implant a chip in her brain so that he can also implant one into his brain, and then it will be like they are one entity, basically. And she kind of nopes the fuck out of there and runs away, but because he has all this weird technology, like, she's worried about him being able to track her, so she just has to leave without anything. And she goes and asks her elderly father if she can stay with him, and she walks into his house, and he has just opened a giant box with a real-life sex doll inside of it that is riding around on his lap as he uses his rascal through his trailer home in a senior trailer park. So, like, it's wacky. This book is so wacky. It's really funny, and there is this other character that becomes kind of a important character towards the middle of the book, and I really don't want to give any part of this away, because reading that part, I was like, what the fuck is this book? Like, what kind of crazy turn did this book take? And every time I read more of it, I had to tell my husband about it, and every time I was like, I don't know, I don't want to spoil this for anybody who is interested in reading this. It is so weird and funny and just like bananas. It's bananas. It's really just kind of off-kilter and strange, and she really explores human sexuality a lot in her books, I find, where her last book, Tampa, that I read, was very much the darker side. This one was kind of like the kookier side, I guess. So, I don't know, it's very weird. I think the thing that I didn't like about this is that it didn't seem to have a very clear plot line besides that Hazel is trying to get away from her husband. It was like, it almost had no plot. It was almost plotless. So, I don't know. It was really fun to read, but sometimes it was just like, why? I guess. I don't know. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. I just don't think it's one of my favorite books ever, you know? Really good, one I would recommend, really fun to read, but not one of my favorites. I have 2 books left here. One is Black Mad Wheel by Josh Malerman, and the other is Shock Rock, which is a horror anthology. This is also a horror book, kind of. I don't know. But these 2 I am going to talk about in a future trope video. So, I'm not going to tell you about them today, and that's probably good because that would make this video like 10 minutes longer, and it is already kind of long. So, I don't know. I read 11 books this month, or, I mean, do I count The Chill? I read like a long books amount of that book. I read 11 books. It was a pretty good reading month for me, I guess. Despite the fact that I had a lot of 2-star rated books this month. My average was 3.18 stars, so that is lower than my average usually is. My average ratings are. So, anyways, thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you have thoughts on any of these, but I will see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!